The Kshatriyan Empire had ruled the Orion Arm for 10,000 years. Their crystalline fortresses, carved into the hearts of mountains, had never fallen to enemy forces until they met humanity. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the drop bay, her Mark VI orbital assault armor humming with power. The massive deployment vessel Thunderchild hung in high orbit above Caxus Prime, cloaked in the shadow of the system's larger moon. 300 of Earth's finest waited with her, each encased in 2 tons of humanity's most advanced warfare technology. "They say we're insane," Sarah's voice carried across the tactical network to her troops. "The Kshatriyans believe their fortress worlds are impregnable, that no species would be mad enough to drop from orbit through their defense grid." She smiled beneath her helmet. "Let's prove them right about the madness part." The mission was simple on paper: disable the planetary shield generator protecting the Kshatriyan's capital city of Kristallos. Without those shields, the Earth fleet could begin their assault. The hard part: the generator was buried 2 kilometers inside Mount Thanatos, protected by layers of automated defense systems and elite Kshatriyan Crystal Guard units. "Drop countdown initiated," the ship's AI announced. 90 seconds to optimal insertion window. Sarah ran through her final checks. The experimental phase shift modules integrated into their armor were humanity's secret weapon. In theory, they would allow the drop troops to pass through solid matter for brief moments, just long enough to bypass the mountain's outer layers and reach the facilities within. No one had ever attempted a combat drop with the technology. 30 seconds, the AI continued. Defense grid active. Multiple targeting solutions detected. The Kshatriyan defense grid was lighting up, massive energy weapons swiveling to track the Earth vessel. They hadn't spotted them yet, but they would soon. Sarah's hand tightened on her plasma lance. 10 seconds. "Good hunting, drop troopers." "Remember," Sarah broadcast, "we only get one shot at this. The phase shift modules have enough power for exactly 3 minutes of operation. Time your drops, hit your targets, and show these crystal cowboys why humanity owns the vertical battlefield." The bay doors opened silently to the void of space. Below them, Caxus Prime filled half the sky, a jewel of blue-green clouds and crystalline mountain ranges that caught the light of the system's sun like facets of a massive diamond. "Drop in 3, 2, 1. Sarah stepped into nothing. 300 of Earth's finest followed her into the abyss. The first salvos from the defense grid lit up the night sky, creating an artificial aurora of death that the drop troops plunged through. Sarah's armor compensated automatically, micro-thrusters adjusting her trajectory by millimeters to thread through the gaps in the barrage. "Grid pattern Delta," she commanded as they hit the upper atmosphere. "Spread formation. Maintain phase shift synchronization." They fell like a lethal rain of shooting stars, their armor beginning to glow as atmospheric friction built up. The Kshatriyan defensive batteries tracked them now, filling the sky with crystalline shards of energy that could slice through conventional armor like paper. But humanity had learned from their previous encounters with Kshatriyan weapons. Their armor was anything but conventional. Sarah's tactical display showed their target approaching rapidly. Mount Thanatos rose from the crystalline plains like a jagged spear thrust into the heavens. At their current velocity, they would impact in less than 30 seconds. "Phase shift modules to full power on my mark," she broadcast. The mountain's surface rushed up to meet them. Mark. Reality seemed to blur around Sarah as the phase shift field engaged. Her armor sensors registered the mountain's layers passing through her like smoke, rock, crystal, metal, more crystal. Warning indicators flashed as the module's power reserves dropped precipitously. 20 seconds of phase shift remaining. They passed through the mountain's outer defensive layer, automated turrets tracking phantom targets that their sensors couldn't quite lock onto. 15 seconds. The inner security envelope approached, a honeycomb of security checkpoints and crystal guard barracks. 10 seconds. "Prepare for reversion," Sarah commanded. "Weapons hot. Hit them hard, hit them fast. Show them why humans dropping from orbit is about to become their worst nightmare. 5 seconds. The generator complex appeared on their tactical displays, a massive crystalline heart pulsing with enough energy to shield an entire city. Revert. Now. 300 Earth drop troops materialized inside the most secure facility on Caxus Prime, their phase shift fields collapsing just as their weapons came online. The Crystal Guard never had a chance to sound the alarm. Control center secured. Lieutenant Rivera reported over the tactical net. Shield generator targeting data acquired. Plant the charges, Sarah ordered, her lance cutting down another guard. Let's show the galaxy why you should always fear the species crazy enough to weaponize falling from orbit. The charges detonated 60 seconds later, as the generator complex collapsed around them. Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. This is Commander Chen to all Earth forces. The shields are down. I repeat, the shields are down. Crystallos is open for business. In high orbit, the Earth fleet emerged from its hiding place behind the system's outer planets. The Caxians were about to learn that humanity's insanity was matched only by their effectiveness. And somewhere in the burning ruins of their greatest fortress, a new legend was born. The day humans learned to fall through mountains. The day the Caxian Empire's invincibility died. The day humanity proved that sometimes the most lethal force in the galaxy isn't the one that fights its way up from the ground, but the one insane enough to fall from heaven itself. The Caxian response to humanity's orbital assault was swift and brutal. Within weeks, every fortress world in their empire bristled with new defenses, gravitic disruptors designed to tear drop troops apart during descent, atmospheric ionization fields that made phase shift technology useless, and automated defense platforms that could track and eliminate even stealth-equipped vessels. Lieutenant James "Ghost" Morrison stood in the briefing room of the ETS Shadowfall, studying the holographic display of their target, the Caxian Research Facility on Helios 9. After the loss of Crystallos, the Empire had moved their most sensitive projects to this remote desert world, protecting them with their newly developed anti-orbital defenses. Our standard drop protocols are no longer viable, Admiral Zhang explained to the assembled strike team. The Caxians have adapted, which is why we're implementing Ghost Protocol. The hologram shifted, showing a new type of drop armor. Sleeker than the Mark VI, it seemed to drink in the light, its surface a void that hurt the eyes to look at directly. The Mark VI Phantom, Zhang continued. No shields, no phase shift, no powered systems at all during descent, just cutting-edge metamaterials that bend light, heat, and gravity around the wearer. In theory, you'll be completely undetectable. In theory, someone asked. We haven't had time to test it properly. The Caxians are developing something big at that facility, something that could turn the tide of the war. We need to know what it is, and we need to know now. Morrison studied the armor specs. No powered systems meant no thrust correction during descent. No emergency protocols if something went wrong. They would be falling blind, relying solely on initial trajectory calculations and their own skill to hit a target zone less than 50 meters wide. Time to deployment, he asked. 6 hours. The Shadowfall will make a high-speed pass through the system's asteroid belt. The debris should mask your drop signatures long enough to get you through the upper defense grid. Morrison nodded. How many drops? Just one. Zhang's expression was grim. You. The briefing room erupted in protests. Solo drops were against every protocol in the book. Even with powered armor, the risks were astronomical. It's the only way. Zhang cut through the noise. Multiple drops increased the chance of detection exponentially. Lieutenant Morrison has the highest success rate in the Corps. If anyone can make this work, it's him. Morrison kept his expression neutral, but his mind was already calculating trajectories, wind patterns, descent angles. One mistake, 1 degree off in his entry vector, and he'd miss the target zone. Best case, he'd impact in the desert and cook inside his powerless armor. Worst case, he'd hit the facility's outer walls at terminal velocity. The facility's defenses, he asked. State of the art. But they're all designed to detect and counter powered armor systems. Nothing in their arsenal is equipped to spot what amounts to a human-shaped hole in space. Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The Caitians had learned to fear humans dropping from orbit, so humanity would teach them to fear what they couldn't see coming. 6 hours later, Morrison stood in the Shadowfall's drop bay, encased in the prototype Mark HFY. The armor felt different, lighter, more like a second skin than the powered suits he was used to. Without active systems, there was no comforting hum of generators, no tactical readouts in his helmet display. Final trajectory calculations complete, the ship's AI announced. Atmospheric conditions on target are within acceptable parameters. Drop window opens in 30 seconds. The orbital defense station above Colony Beta 7 detected the Caitian fleet 3 hours before they dropped out of hyperspace. Captain Diana Rice watched from the command center as 37 warships materialized like angry wasps, their crystalline hulls reflecting the light of Beta 7's dying sun. They'd brought their dreadnoughts, her XO noted grimly. All 3 of them. Diana's hands tightened on the command rail. Beta 7 was humanity's most advanced colony world, home to over 5 million civilians, and the prototype facility for the TITN program. If it fell, Earth would lose more than just a colony. Status of the evacuation, she asked. 15% complete. We need at least 6 more hours to get the civilians to the bunkers. Diana nodded, her mind already running through scenarios. The colony's conventional defenses wouldn't last 6 minutes against that fleet, let alone 6 hours. But conventional wasn't why she'd been chosen to defend Beta 7. Initialize TITN launch sequence, she ordered. Wake the devils. Deep beneath the colony's surface, in a hangar larger than most spacecraft carriers, 12 massive figures stirred to life. Each stood 20 meters tall, their armor a hybrid of traditional drop suit technology and experimental metamaterials. The TITN units represented humanity's response to the Caitians' anti-orbital defenses. If they couldn't drop troops safely anymore, they'd drop something bigger. All pilots, this is control, Diana broadcast. The enemy is 6 minutes out. Today we find out if all those simulations were worth the nightmares. Let's show them what happens when humanity decides to weaponize giant robots falling from orbit. In his Titan's cockpit, Lieutenant Marcus Way felt the massive machine synchronize with his nervous system. The neural interface was still experimental, still prone to feedback that could fry a pilot's brain if they pushed too hard. But it was the only way to control something this size with the precision needed for orbital deployment. Titan Squad, sound off, he called. Titan 2, ready. That was Sarah Chen's daughter, Maria. The orbital drop combat skills ran in the family. Titan 3. The battle quickly devolved into chaos. The TITANs were wildly outnumbered, but their mobility and durability made them nearly impossible to pin down. They danced between enemy ships, causing damage where they could but primarily keeping the Caitian fleet occupied and away from the colony. Evacuation update, Control reported. 40% complete. Keep them busy for 3 more hours. Marcus gritted his teeth as his Titan's neural interface warned of building feedback. They'd never maintained combat operations this long in simulations. The human brain wasn't meant to process this many calculations, this much spatial awareness, for extended periods. Status report, he called to his squad. Titan 4, offline. The first casualty. Pilot ejected safely. Titan 9, structural damage to left arm. Still operational. Titan 2 here. Maria Chen's voice was strained. Neural feedback is spiking. Don't know how much longer I can stay connected. Marcus watched as a Caitian destroyer lined up a shot on Maria's position. Without thinking, he threw his Titan into a powered dive, crossing 3 kilometers of space in seconds to intercept the beam with his shield. The impact sent him spinning, warning lights flashing across his neural interface. "Fall back to secondary positions," he ordered. "Conserve power. Make them come to us." The remaining Titans regrouped, forming a defensive screen between the Kaxian fleet and the colony. Below them, Beta 7 continued its evacuation, millions of lives depending on 12 pilots and their experimental war machines. "You know what the worst part is," Rodriguez commented as they watched the Kaxian fleet regroup for another assault. "After this, they're going to be even more scared of what comes falling out of orbit at them." Marcus smiled despite the pain building behind his eyes. "That's the idea, George. That's always been the idea." The neural interface screamed a warning as the Kaxian dreadnoughts began to advance. Round 2 was about to begin, and humanity's giant robots were running on fumes. But they would hold. They had to hold. Because somewhere below them, civilians were running for their lives. Because humanity had learned long ago that sometimes the best defense wasn't a bigger gun or a stronger shield. Sometimes, the best defense was being crazy enough to build giant robots specifically designed to fall from orbit, and being even crazier enough to find pilots willing to ride them down. Admiral Helena Voss stood on the bridge of the ETS Thermopylae, watching the battle unfold through the tactical hologram. Proxima Centauri, humanity's first extrasolar colony, burned below them. The Kaxian fleet had arrived in overwhelming force, 200 ships against Earth's defensive fleet of 50. But ships weren't why they called her the architect of victory. "Status of Operation Thunderfall," she asked her tactical officer. "Drop troops are in position. Titan units are charged and ready. Ghost protocol teams are dark but reporting green. Waiting on your command, Admiral." Helena allowed herself a small smile. The Kaxians thought they had humanity figured out. They'd adapted to their orbital drop tactics, developed countermeasures for every strategy Earth had shown them. But they'd never faced everything at once. "Send the signal," she ordered. "All units, commence Operation Thunderfall." Across Earth's fleet, drop bays opened silently to the void. 5,000 drop troops in Mark VII armor launched first, their phase shift modules already charging. Behind them came 30 Titan units, their massive frames modified with new stealth systems derived from Ghost Protocol research, and scattered throughout, invisible to both sides' sensors. 50 Ghost Protocol operators fell like shadows between stars. The Kaxian fleet reacted instantly, their anti-orbital defenses lighting up the space around Proxima. Gravitic disruptors, crystal shards, and energy beams created a lethal web designed to shred anything attempting atmospheric entry. But humanity had learned from every battle, every defeat, every victory. The drop troops split into smaller groups, each using different approach vectors. When the Kaxians adjusted their defenses to track them, the Titans used the gaps to begin their own descent. "First wave entering atmosphere," the tactical officer reported. "Casualties at 15%. Better than projected." Helena nodded. "Begin Phase 2. The Ghost Protocol operators, completely undetectable in their Mark VII suits, had been falling ahead of the main force. They hit their targets simultaneously, key defense platforms and command nodes across the Kaxian fleet. Silent explosions rippled through the enemy formation as crucial systems failed. Enemy fleet coordination dropping. Their defense grid is showing gaps. "Launch second wave," Helena ordered. "All units, execute attack pattern Sierra 0. Another 3,000 drop troops launched from Earth's ships. But these were different. Their armor was painted matte black, absorbing both light and sensor scans. Each carried enough explosives to level a small city. "Black Watch units away," the tactical officer confirmed, beginning their run. The Black Watch had been Helena's personal project. Drop troops specifically trained for ship-to-ship combat in zero gravity. While the first wave and the Titans occupied the Kaxians' planetary defenses, the Black Watch would take the fight directly to their fleet. The battle devolved into organized chaos. Drop troops phased through enemy ships' hulls, appearing inside critical systems rooms. Tatians engaged Kaixian capital ships in brutal close-quarters combat, their massive frames designed to survive impacts that would destroy conventional vessels. Ghost Protocol operators continued their silent sabotage, turning the enemy fleet's coordination into confusion. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. Lieutenant Morrison's team has reached the planetary defense mainframe." Helena's smile grew wider. While everyone watched the space battle, a Ghost Protocol team had dropped onto Proxima itself, targeting the very systems preventing Earth's fleet from providing close orbital support. "Tell them to execute their override codes on my mark." She watched the tactical display, waiting for the perfect moment. Mark. On the surface of Proxima, the planetary defense grid suddenly turned on its masters. Massive ground-based weapons that had been targeting Earth's drop troops swiveled to target Kaixian ships instead. "Enemy fleet is breaking formation," the tactical officer reported with barely contained excitement. "They're falling back to secondary positions. They're also transmitting on all frequencies," communications added. They're requesting a ceasefire." Helena leaned forward, studying the tactical display. The Kaixian fleet was in disarray, caught between Earth's ships above, compromised defenses below, and enemies they couldn't detect or predict striking from every direction. "Show me the casualty numbers," she ordered. "Drop troops at 23% losses. Titan units at 40%. Ghost Protocol teams." He paused, double-checking his data. "No confirmed losses. Better than their most optimistic projections." The combined arms doctrine she'd developed had worked even better than expected. The Kaixians had learned to fear humans dropping from orbit, but they'd never imagined humans could weaponize that fear itself. "Send to all units," Helena commanded. "Operation Thunderfall is a success. Secure your objectives and prepare for occupation operations." She paused, then added, "And someone tell Lieutenant Morrison he owes me a drink." His Ghost Protocol team just helped rewrite the book on orbital warfare. As the Battle of Proxima wound down, Helena watched her troops securing their victory. The Kaixians had thought they'd adapted to humanity's orbital warfare doctrine. Instead, they'd forced humanity to perfect it. Drop troops who could phase through solid matter. 20-meter war machines that danced between stars. Special operators who fell invisible through space. And now an entire doctrine built around using them together, turning humanity's signature insanity into a symphony of synchronized destruction. "Message from Earth Command," communications reported. "They're asking about our status." Helena looked at the burning ships, the secured planet, and the future she could see unfolding. Tell them that humanity just proved we don't just own the vertical battlefield anymore." She smiled as she watched another Kaixian ship surrender to a squad of drop troops. "We've turned falling from orbit into an art form, and the galaxy will never be the same." The Kaixian High Command had gathered in their last fortress, a massive space station carved from a single crystal asteroid, hidden in the gravitational shadow of a black hole. Their council chamber held the remnants of an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years, now brought to the brink of defeat by a species that had mastered falling from the sky. They were debating surrender terms when the impossible happened again. The station's sensors detected nothing. Its defenses remained silent, but in the council chamber, reality itself seemed to blur as Lieutenant James Morrison materialized from thin air, his Mark VI Ghost Protocol armor still bending light around its edges. He wasn't alone. Commander Sarah Chen phased through the ceiling moments later, her Mark VI armor systems leaving a trail of quantum distortion. Through the walls came Marcus Wei and his remaining Titan pilots, their massive war machines somehow squeezed through dimensions that shouldn't have been possible. And from the shadows stepped Admiral Helena Voss herself, wearing a diplomatic uniform rather than combat armor. "Gentlemen," Voss addressed the stunned Kaixian leadership, "I believe it's time we discuss the future of our species." The Kaixian Supreme Commander found his voice first. "How this station is undetectable. Its defenses are perfect. It's impossible for you to be here. Impossible. Morrison's laugh echoed through his stealth suit. Your empire's about to learn what humanity does with impossible. Voss stepped forward, her presence commanding attention despite being the only human in the room, not wearing powered armor of some kind. When humanity first reached for the stars, we were afraid. Space is vast, empty, and lethal. But we learned something crucial about ourselves during those early days. She gestured to her warriors. We learned that humans are at their most innovative when you tell them something can't be done. You said orbital drops were suicide. We made them an art form. You developed countermeasures. We created phase shift technology. You adapted to that. We built machines that could dance between stars. And when you hid here, Morrison added, thinking even humans couldn't reach you, well, we combined everything we'd learned just to prove you wrong. The mission to reach this station had been deemed impossible by both sides' military analysts. The gravitational forces around the black hole made normal approach impossible. The station's position made conventional drops suicidal. Its defenses were specifically designed to counter every known human tactic. So humanity had simply invented new ones. The Titan units used their mass to create a gravitational tunnel, Voss explained, seeing the question in the Katian's eyes. Commander Chen's phase shift troops used that tunnel to establish a quantum bridge. Lieutenant Morrison's Ghost Protocol team infiltrated through that bridge to disable your inner defenses. Impossible became improbable, became difficult, became done. She laid a data crystal on the council table. These are our terms. They're quite reasonable, all things considered. Your empire retains autonomy over its core worlds. You keep your culture, your way of life. All we require is acceptance of Earth as an equal power, and your help dealing with a greater threat. Greater threat. The Supreme Commander's crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion. What could possibly be a greater threat than humans who fall from the sky? Voss's expression turned grim. We detected them at the edge of the galaxy 3 months ago. A species that doesn't build ships, doesn't use conventional weapons. They travel between stars by riding gravitational waves, and they consume everything in their path. Our analysts call them the Devourers. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Katians had ruled space for 10,000 years through technological superiority. Humanity had proven themselves their equals in barely a decade through sheer determination and innovative insanity. But what defense could either species mount against enemies that surfed gravity itself? That's why we're here, Voss continued. Your empire has the most advanced manufacturing capabilities in known space. We have the most innovative combat doctrine ever developed. Apart, we might survive the Devourers. Together, Morrison finished, we might be able to teach them why everyone in this galaxy has learned to fear what falls from above. The Supreme Commander studied the humans before him. The ghost who appeared from nowhere. The commander who walked through walls. The pilots who bent space to their will. And the admiral who had orchestrated it all. If we agree, he said slowly, what exactly do you propose? Voss smiled. It was the same smile she'd worn when she first proposed Operation Thunderfall. How would your engineers like to help us build drop troops the size of moons? The war that had started with a single human falling through a mountain ended with a treaty signed in an impossible place. As the details were hammered out, Commander Chen approached Morrison. Think the Devourers know what they're in for? She asked. Morrison watched as Katian engineers were already clustering around Marcus Way's Titan, their crystalline forms vibrating with excitement as they studied the human war machine. They're about to learn what every species in this galaxy now knows, he replied. When humans decide to weaponize falling from orbit, the only sane response is to surrender before we start getting creative. Above them, through the station's crystal walls, the black hole's accretion disk painted space in shades of blue and purple. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were approaching, confident in their mastery of gravity itself. They had no idea that humanity had already turned falling through space into an art form. No idea that the species they were approaching had learned to weaponize the very concept of descent from above. No idea that they were about to face two civilizations united by the simple, terrifying truth that had reshaped the galaxy. The most dangerous force in the universe isn't the one that fights its way up from below. It's the one crazy enough to turn falling from heaven into a weapon of war. And humanity had just gotten started.